very special episode of the Comics Pals Book Club. This is the first one of 2018, and we're very, very happy and excited to present this to you guys. Today we're going to be talking about Black Panther.
Power Ranger. Oh, Black Panther.
Excuse me.
Did I read the wrong thing, guys?
There's not even a Black Power Ranger comic. I don't.
Yeah.
Oh.
Where are you even coming
This is a
from?
flimsy bit.
Well, the reason why it's so flimsy is Marco literally told us what he was going to do before we recorded.
Phil, I gotta ruin it.
Lifting the curtain, baby.
Yeah, when I laughed, it was because you actually did the joke again.
Yeah.
You got a shock laugh out of me.
Not
I
only
can't
are you
move.
telling lame jokes, but you're wearing the same shirt you were wearing yesterday. Jesus.
Oh man, called
You're
out.
Sorry.
You're fucking bringing your C game today, Marco.
I had to do it.
Isn't it like 4 where you guys are right now?
Yep.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
about.
That's
That's bedtime for Kale.
I thought there was a follow-up.
Yeah.
No, I think his comment was more that like Marco's unwashed masses have just been stewing for about a day.
Nasty.
I mean, yeah.
Okay, let me introduce the book. We're going to be talking about A Nation Under Our Feet, which is the 3-part, or I should say 3-book story arc, 12 issues long, from Ta-Nehisi Coates and several artists, Brian Stelfreeze, Chris Sprouse. Those were the pencilers on this one, and then you had a variety of colorists as well. Lauren Martin, Matt Miller, Paul Mounts, Rachel Rosenberg. So, big crew working together on this one. And overall...
You could say that it was Black Panther's crew.
Oh. Boy, everyone's
No.
swinging for the fences this afternoon, huh?
This is why we
Striking out all
record
over.
in the mornings, typically, because, by this point in the day, we just have nothing left.
I spent all my funnies on the video game pals.
all our jokes are recycled and old now.
Now?
So, this is a particularly special series because Coates is a writer who is very, very well known, very, very popular in, a different space. He won an award. He won the National Book Award and the MacArthur Genius Award for his book Between the World and Me. And Marvel wanted to popularize the Black Panther in comics again just because of, his appearance in Civil War, and then the upcoming, which is now impending, and for some of you already has released, Black Panther film. And so they wanted to get a superstar black writer onto this book, and he made perfect sense, especially at the time, given where his career was. And this is his...
It was like hot off of that award.
Yeah.
Right? Like he was kind of like a new name when he took this on almost.
He was hot off the awards. And the book was very big and popular at that time. So this is actually his first comic book, though, which is the really interesting part, and I'm sure that'll play into our discussion, is that this is his first at-bat. And I'm very interested and excited to hear what you guys have to say and what you think about his first sort of year as a comic book writer with this book and how it did. So hopefully you guys are listening, can follow along. If you have had the opportunity to pick up the books, we mentioned it on the most recent episode of the Comics Pals, or if you've already read them prior, that's great. We're anxious to hear your opinions about it as well, and I'll just tell you guys how you can reach out to us. You can do so by writing to us at thecomicspals@gmail.com. You can also hit us up on social media at The Comics Pals, wherever your social media is sold. And if you are watching this on YouTube, of course, you can leave a comment. And while you're doing that, you can leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you like what you hear, and share it with your friends. And let them know about this great book. Let them know about this very impactful series and that you're a fan of it. So with that, let's get started. So I'm just going to introduce the sort of preamble of where this book sort of comes into, or how we get to this place, right? How the Marvel Universe, Marvel Comics,
It all started back in 1943
when Stan Lee created Marvel Comics. No. So this is hot off the heels of Secret Wars, the 2015 edition, which saw, the lead into Secret Wars saw Thanos and the Black Order actually invading Wakanda in search of the Infinity Stones. And Shuri, who was the Black Panther at the time, or I should say was the Queen of Wakanda at the time, her and her brother T'Challa were both Black Panthers. She takes a stand to fight for her country while the Black Panther kind of goes off and tries to save the world in other areas and leaves Wakanda in her hands, and as a result, she is frozen solid, essentially. The same thing happens to Thanos in the Infinity series, but he's broken out. Here, they couldn't figure out how to get Shuri out of the predicament that she was in. And so when we get into the book, T'Challa is not only grieving over the perceived loss of his sister, but also painstakingly trying to figure a way to get her back. But that also plays into where the Wakandans are in terms of their spirit, where the Wakandan spirit is at, because they had been drowned out by Namor and the seas. They've been attacked by the Black Order, so a lot of really awful things happen to them in quick succession, and that definitely plays into where we come into this series with. So the first question that I have is, was anybody confused about why Wakanda where it was, or do you feel like the story gives you the information that you need to understand that early on? Marco, go ahead.
So I was confused just because I wasn't sure necessarily how the whole Namor thing, the Black Order, all that Thanos, they would always bring it up, but I didn't know where it fit in necessarily. It sort of explains it and it touches upon it, and I feel like in reading it, you don't need that information, but there is context there to certain characters' actions and certain characters' just sort of thought processes that I feel would have been beneficial for me to know, but it's not something that's necessary. So I felt that was it was written well, that I didn't need that history, but it would have added to what I got out of the book.
In fairness to the book, though, you did think you were reading a Black Power Ranger book. So that's how you do a joke, Marco.
There you go. That was good.
I don't know if I agree. It's obviously Black Panther.
That's not how you do a joke.
Yeah.
I was reading New Avengers when a lot of that stuff happened, so I knew about the Namor, invasion and the drowning and all that, but since then I sort of lapsed, and a lot of the information presented in Black Panther felt sort of shoehorned in. To me, it felt like they like I understand that this is where Wakanda is at, and these are the events that happened. Like they did a really good job of putting that information in, but at the same time, like I didn't feel like enough context was there. And I think in the hands of a more skilled, more seasoned comic writer, I think it would have come off a little easier.
But that's with the context of you having understood what that other stuff was.
So, I mean, a little, yeah. Like I probably understood it more than you, right? Like because I read some of it.
See, yeah, I having not read that stuff, I think I kind of fall more on Marco's side of the fence, where I wouldn't say that I felt like I needed the context. I think that the script stood on its own for me to understand the relevance of those events in so far as how they were applied to where we were at, why this series of events led to Wakanda being in revolution and Black Panther being kind of maligned by his people at that point, right? And that was all I really needed to know.
Yeah.
It would have been cool, I guess, to have that context, but honestly, I didn't feel like there was any gap for me in terms of getting why these events were relevant to what was going on.
When you watch Star Wars, you don't need to be like, hey, how'd this Empire come about? Who's Darth Vader?
Like, what were those Clone Wars about?
Yeah,
right? Nope.
I've got enough exposition to be like, okay.
So for you then, Phil and Pete, the information was presented like clear enough, and you just got it, and that was it.
I literally just needed a sentence to be like, oh, this happened. Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, like they recapped it a couple times throughout the series, and that was kind of my one complaint. Was like, I felt like they told me about the events a lot to reinforce how important they were, without really giving me more information. Like I remember there was that one moment. I don't remember when the issue was because I read like the whole thing in 2 sittings, so it's kind of like it all blurs together. But there's that one page of like literally the 3 threats that they had faced, and it's like this, and this like decimated the nation or whatever. And I was like, that's all I needed. Like that was a really good visual recap, I thought, of just like, here are the threats, here's why each of them mattered, and cool. Like that's all. And beyond that, like every other time that they like kind of felt the need to explain backstory to me, I could kind of see where Kale was coming from, of it feeling a little like info dumpy. And because it was just like I get it, you know.
And now that you say that, I think that's probably where I'm coming from more so. In that every time they drop that info, it didn't really feel like they were adding anything that the reader didn't know.
I think that's a fair point.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think so. For me, as somebody who experienced all of those things while they were happening, obviously it didn't add anything for me to be told again what took place. But I think that the initial bit of information, like this is how we got here, is pivotal. I do believe that, just because so much of where this nation is, where Wakanda is built on that. However, in saying that, I do think that they probably could have. It probably would have been okay to just do it the one time, and let that be that.
I will say, in his defense, though, I think if we had been reading this month to month, we wouldn't have even noticed this.
Probably.
Like, I think if I hadn't sat down and read this 3-volume series in the span of like 48 hours, I don't know that I would have felt so much like, you just told me this, you know, like. Because it was, like, one sitting where I'm being reminded versus, like, if I'd watched that play out over the course of a year, like, it might have been like, yeah, right, like, that is such a big theme of what's going on here. Like, it is okay to maybe just nudge back to it.
Maybe.
But do you think if you were... I guess my question is sort of answers itself because it doesn't necessarily make sense, but do you think if you were reading this monthly that you wouldn't already know?
Not necessarily, because I think you have to think about like what this book is supposed to be, right? Like Sean's like preamble for it was that this was the book to make Black Panther relevant again. Like you're not necessarily reading New Avengers and then picking this up. Like you might have just picked this up and you don't know anything about Black Panther or Wakanda other than the fact that like Wakanda is this like, you know, maybe you know that it's like this hyper advanced technical like secretive isolationist nation, and that's where vibranium comes from.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's the surface level like comic fan thing to know, you know? And like I know when the book came out, I remember going to my local comic book shop like on Free Comic Book Day and like seeing a bunch of little kids who had just come out of Civil War picking up Black Panther #1, and like they don't know that shit. So I feel like having this there like for the people like me or Marco who are just jumping on, or for new people who don't know anything about Marvel or Black Panther but thought he was cool, I feel like that little recap was necessary. And if you were going to it month to month, it might be helpful to have that.
Yeah, definitely. So, with that being said, this book does introduce like a ton of new characters and sort of new themes to the Black Panther mythos, and that's not a surprise because Coates pulls a lot of what this story is from other literary works, and there are a lot of allusions to that in the book, and you can pick those out and parse those out for yourself if you're aware or if you care enough to dig a little deeper. But some of the characters that are introduced are actually very, very interesting. And I want to start with the sort of villainous, quote-unquote, pair. And I say quote because there's definitely a gray area in a lot of the characters that are presented here, including Black Panther. Not all of the stuff that he does would every one of us consider unilaterally good, and you might not consider the perspective of the antagonist unilaterally bad, which makes this book so interesting.
Phil's all about those antagonists.
Yeah.
Black Panther's a villain in this book, dude.
That's definitely a perspective. So let's talk about Tetu and Zenzi. So Tetu is he's a shaman who's kind of the head of the people, which is the rebellion movement, and Zenzi is the leader of the Ugandan army, which she gains control of by enhancing their emotions and bringing them out, making them sort of act as if they were only purely emotional beings. So what did you guys think of them as, the sort of antagonist for the book?
Morally ambiguous.
Mm-hmm.
They are the type of revolutionary that the perspective is that the ends justify the means. And Zenzi's means are extremely morally questionable. However, I'm putting that mildly.
Not even questionable. It's like they're reprehensible.
Right. But when you go in, the good thing about the book is how much flavor, like real world politics, exists in this. Yeah. And from her perspective, she is an Ugandan nationalist. She has legitimate claim to the outcome of fields, which has impoverished her country due to economic nationalism from King T'Challa, and she is going about trying to help her people the best way that she thinks she can. And it makes her character extremely nuanced.
What about Tetu for you?
I mean, look, he comes off more like a straight up bad guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I'm glad that's where you clarified, because I agree with you about her. Tetu is a fucking warlord with magic powers.
He's a straight up monster.
Yeah, he's a fucking terrorist. He put bombs in people and allowed his armies to rape and pillage. It's under the guise of revolution.
No, yeah.
Go ahead, Phil.
The real heroes of the story we'll get to later.
I think, and speaking to Tetu, and specifically what you just said, Pete, it's interesting because to me, a lot of the stuff that he does or agrees to is almost kind of it's another element or a different side of what Black Panther is also doing and what's also happening within the nation. Yeah, because even though Tetu is allowing some really crappy things to happen, especially as it relates to the women in his villages, we see that Black Panther is going to allow Aneka to be killed for killing a chieftain who was allowing the exact same things to happen. So it really kind of calls into question, and I think that's why one of the reasons why this book is so good and important, it calls into question the laws that allow people who are evil to get away with the things that they do, and whether or not it's justified to take the kinds of actions that Aneka did take to get rid of that guy forever, especially when you're talking about Africa, where a lot of these people are allowed to exist and act for decades and decades, and they get caught, and we all know what they're doing, but they get away with it, and it happens here too in America. Maybe not as openly, but I think if you take these themes and apply them to, you take away some of the more specific things, like he's a chieftain and everything, and you just apply it to America, there are a lot of illusions there.
Sure, absolutely.
Anybody else with thoughts on Tetu or Zenzi?
No, I think that pretty much covers it.
Cool. So
Marco, we're not talking about that witch lady from Power Rangers.
They did both have green powers.
I can't remember her name.
Rita
Rita
Repulsa.
Right? Yeah.
I don't fucking know. I watched that.
I didn't even watch Power Rangers.
It's been 20 years.
So, as I referenced, there is this trial that takes place for Anika, who did kill this chieftain. Now, it's determined by T'Challa's mother, Ramonda, his adopted mother, that she needs to, be brought to trial, or justice needs to take place for her crimes. She needs to be imprisoned, right? And so Ayo, I believe that's her name, or maybe Io, one of those two. I'm not sure exactly how you say that one.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with Io. That's what I'm gonna go with.
I think that probably sounds right.
She speaks on behalf of Anika during her trial, and when she realizes that it's not going to happen and that she's lost that battle to save her loved one, she actually takes this prototype armor, this Midnight Angel armor, and they take matters into their own hands. They escape the imprisonment, and they go on an entire journey that really is one of the major cruxes of this story. So what did you guys think about those two in particular?
I liked it was good to break up T'Challa's narrative with that, because I thought it fleshed out the setting more. You know what I mean? It fleshed out the mysticism, because T'Challa's entire motivation as a character is that he is a spiritually appointed king, right? And having this actual spiritism, or mysticism rather, and spiritualism, it provides context, right? Because I think without that, the Wakandan dynasty looks a lot worse.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And I think they serve as a contrast to both T'Challa and Tetu and Zenzi. Like they are an alternative. I feel like that's what I perceive them as. They're an alternative to either the king and like the reign and the total anarchy that is being brought. They sort of they just want someplace to live. They almost remind me of like refugees, in that sense, like getting caught in the crossfire and sort of trying to do what's best for their people, the people who have also been just displaced, disowned, hurt. They are the voices of the refugees, essentially, to me.
Oh,
like,
I wasn't sure if you meant to you until you said that.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, in the sense that when you look at the actual actions that they take, what are they doing? They're rescuing women who are being raped and beaten or whatever else by these men who have lived and had been given sort of the freedom to live this way and abuse their power over who knows how long, probably way before what we see with Thanos and the Black Order and Namor. These men who have done this historically, and these are two women who are not going to have it anymore, and they build an entire community in the Jabari lands around that, around that unwillingness to allow this to take place anymore. And it's hard to argue against that,
Yeah, I honestly, I really enjoyed this arc. I like these characters quite a bit. I think my biggest issue with the book, though, is, I kind of feel like get ready for this. I agree with Phil.
What the fuck?
That, that, I don't feel like this series ends in a place where I am, sympathetic to the monarchy.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Oh shit.
And I think that the kind of resolution of the narrative is them being we all need to work together is nice, but it's like, like it feels a little dissonant from this story that's told. Where, like,
hell yeah, Peter.
Like, it's great that T'Challa feels bad and everything. Like, the only thing that makes him a king is divine right, and like, I'm an atheist, so it's kind of a tough sell for me. It's like, he's a great hero. I don't think he's a bad person necessarily, but like, he strayed far from the path of righteousness, and like, I don't know. Like, I don't feel like the resolution is super satisfying for me.
Oh, I'm so excited to talk about BP.
I see that as an oversimplification. Black Panther's story in this book is very complex because he's a character who, you're right, is king by divine right. But think about what that is like for him. He didn't ask for that. That's not what he wants for his life.
So
That's
he shouldn't
what
rule.
But think about this though. He wasn't the ruler. Shuri was. He gave up being the king of Wakanda, and she became the queen.
Right.
He only took it back because she died, and he had no choice. That's what he had to do. And that weight, the weight of the nation, is on his shoulders the entire time. And there are several instances throughout the book where the elder people tell him that fact, that he looks at leadership as this heavy burden.
Yep.
When, because of what his status is, it shouldn't be that necessarily. He should be able to act as a king without worrying about what others have done or what the right thing is to do, because he himself is a king. But he doesn't see himself that way. There are things about the history of Wakanda that he's not comfortable with, but he feels unfit to change those things. And they try to tell him, you have all the power to do so. And he uses that power for the better at the end of the book when he changes the rules. That's what was so beautiful about his story, is that he recognizes his own faults and the faults of Wakanda and changes things to make them better ultimately. And he offers, does he? I feel like he does. Maybe I'm misremembering. Doesn't he offer leadership back to Shuri? And I think she rejects it.
I don't think that's what happens, but I think the implication there is that she's in charge. Like, he's ruling as the king, but it's that he's more like a figurehead. He's the representative of the people, but like that the people are really going to be governed by this like parliamentary, like group that is basically all of the revolutionary women and then Shuri.
Right.
Or is it Shuri?
Shuri.
He gives it up. He gives up that. One of the major themes of the book is no one man should have all that power, which is basically the Kanye West lyric.
No one man should have all that power.
Oh,
so yeah, I feel like there are lots of shades of gray with Black Panther's character, and he's on a real journey here, and he goes through so much in this book, and that's why I love what they did with him here.
So, to me, the real world comparisons here is he's a combination of Peter the Great and Nicholas II, in that he is like Peter the Great in that he is too busy going into far distant lands to concern himself with his own people. He's busy fighting Thanos and Namor, and to him he's like, is me providing national security not enough for my people? Bullshit, it's not enough. Fucking tend to your fucking population. And then, like Nicholas II, he comes off like an absentee ruler in that he's just like, he doesn't get it. He's not connected as like a ruler, which is, to your point, that it comes off nuanced as a character, but as a leader, he's terrible. My overall impression is that this is someone who needs to be, the monarchy needs to be abolished. He actually takes advice from like warmongers and like people who profit, like war profiteers, on how to quell rebellions. And that becomes a major source of conflict afterwards, obviously, but he still was listening to this.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Well, so for me, Black Panther's journey here for the public is supposed to be a private one, right? Like, we don't see...
Oh, he's really stressed out.
We don't see President Trump.
Oh,
I feel like Kale like ate way too much. Like he had like way too much food, and he's just like getting the meat sweats. You know.
Well, he's about to talk about President Trump, so it's the same thing.
Get it out. Get it out.
So we don't. We don't.
Just address him by his number.
We don't
45.
see President Trump go through, for example, ideally, we don't see President Trump struggle with the daily decisions that he has to make as a leader.
We kind of do, though.
Hold on. It's not. This is a bad example because of where we're at.
Lay it out.
But you understand what I'm saying. Like,
yeah.
You know, there's a reason Obama went from youngish black man to gray-haired and, you know,
Stressed.
20 years older later.
Dude, he was hot when he was campaigning in 2008, and it's like the weight of the world definitely grayed him up quite a bit.
And so, like, while I agree with you that going to these despots and tyrants was certainly a bad move, the point that T'Challa makes is that he was advised to go to people who are in a position like his. Unfortunately, that led him to the shitty ones, because the rest of civilized society isn't like that.
It's also worth pointing out that he didn't call for these people specifically. Like, it was one of his advisors who made this decision, and he trusted him, and he was like, okay, I'm going to meet with these people. Right. And then when he did, he said that they were all disgusting people and didn't make a deal with them. So.
And he, they were called there specifically for him to listen to, not for him to interact with their ideas. And that information got out against his will. He didn't put that out.
But
yeah, and it was also misrepresented. Like, it wasn't the entire story.
But he literally was listening to like a genocidal maniac who's like, "Oh, this is how you have to squash rebellion." And he literally says, "Tell me more."
Again,
I have
the
to
problem
read
with that,
my
though,
president's Twitter.
The problem with that, though, is that even bad ideas are ideas. Like, you have to put those on the table so that you can push them away later.
Yeah.
Being in the room with them is pushing those ideas. That's pushing those ideas to the side. Like, just being. You don't say "tell me more." That's not pushing those ideas to the side. That's. I don't think. Let me entertain this.
I don't think that him listening to the ideas of these individuals, as horrible as they are, is necessarily the worst thing in the world. There's value in listening to people who you fundamentally disagree with, who have horrible ways of solving problems, just because it may spark a positive idea in your mind. And I think that that's probably what he thought in that moment of, let me salvage this by trying to get something, if there's anything I can get out of this, especially because he was probably at his most desperate moment since the incursions prior to Secret Wars. Well, so this is a horrible moment for him. He's doing whatever he can.
Shit, I didn't.
And I also think it's.
I didn't realize Sean was on the Wakandan PR Council.
I mean,
gotta get his vibranium somewhere. I also think it's worth pointing out that, like, you know, in that moment, right? Like, he says, "Tell me more," but it's like his resolve isn't ever tested. You know, it's like that interaction only reaffirms his path towards nonviolence. Or as nonviolent as you can be as someone who dresses up as a fucking panther and beats the shit out of people. But superhero comics deal in that.
There is one character who we still haven't talked about yet that I think is actually maybe the linchpin character of this whole story.
Shangamire?
Yeah, Shangamire the Philosopher. That was one of the most interesting parts about this whole thing. Phil, why don't you talk to that a little?
Well, Shangamire is like this like professor at one of the universities there who basically has been like teaching for decades. He had the ear of T'Challa's father, who believed in like civil discourse and this French style Enlightenment movement of discourse, which makes sense because he's like an absolute monarch. But in the same breath, he has the ear of people who are unhappy and filled with unrest throughout Wakanda, and he becomes a polarizing character throughout the entire story. Is he this radical inciter of radical ideas, or is he just a wise leader? Is he a Baba?
Right. So first of all, I looked at this guy as like old Phil, like this is Phil in like 40 years after he's already taught in college, trying to bring the system down from within. You know, I had a love-hate quote unquote relationship with this character.
Is that your relationship with me?
Yes.
Yeah. Today,
100%.
Literally today alone. Yes.
And I say that just because I love his ideas, right? But this is one of those. This is why this book is so interesting. Is that like in the space of ideas, right? Everything is on the table. But when it comes to leadership, right? When it comes to governance, it's so much more nuanced than that. And it's easy to say a lot of the things that he says, but it's a lot harder to apply them. And we know that because we're seeing Black Panther struggle and trying. And we're seeing what he's incited by saying what he's said. And there's nothing wrong with what he said. It's the people who are taking it the way they are and applying it in a negative fashion. But this is the power of ideas. And when not sort of presented in a way that's like palatable for the masses and not going to incite this kind of violence, this is what can occur. So it's so fascinating what this character represents for this story and the wider implications of him in society.
Yeah, I feel like the theme of the book is that like ideas are the driving force behind the majority of or getting into people's heads a certain idea is more dangerous than like anything else. For like it brought up something that's happening in Ecuador right now, where the current president is a like extremely corrupt individual, and the former president has returned from like Sweden or something to come back and to sort of rectify everything. There's this huge revolution and movement that's going on right now. There was a vote today actually on like a certain piece of legislation, and it boils down to whose ideology sort of trumps the other. And then once there is like a quote unquote winner, how does the execution then affect that the rollout of the idea?
Trump's, Marco. Trump's. That cough says it all.
Oh my goodness!
You said whose ideology trumps the other, and
oh, did
yes,
I?
Oh, low hanging fruit.
Yep.
I don't know I don't remember what my point was now.
Great, good job, Phil.
I wanted to speak to something that you said before, though, where I think that that idea of the projected image of something is more important than the reality of it is like a major theme throughout the story, right? Like in the opening moments of like us kind of catching up with T'Challa, that's like what he says, right? Like a king has to like be mysterious. Like his what he withholds is his power. I tell information to my allies, enemies, and people when I think they need to hear it, right? Like that's a major part of that theme. At the end of the narrative, when they are defending their crown city, his sister says that the image of the strength of the city will be what ultimately saves them, if it comes to that, right? If it comes to fighting to defend the Golden City, it's the projected image of the power of the government that really matters. You know, the power of the monarchy, more so than what it can actually do.
To speak,
and yeah, that's revisited throughout the entire story.
To speak to that, I was looking for a specific page that both spoke to Shangemeyer and to what we're talking about. The quote is, "Seen clearly, Shangemeyer is no apostle. Indeed, he is the bearer of a tradition as old and as Wakandan as our own." And then what is said is, his question is fair. The answer is simple. It is the gospel of Shangmire that I hear cited on the street. It is the teachings which my people now hail as prophecy. He is not the hand of rebellion, but he is its heart. I propose to cut out the heart.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of my favorite things about the character too is, and I think what made him ultimately work for me as a device in the story is that, like, there's another line I think even in that same issue around that same point where they're basically making the point of like, you know, he's an old man who realizes that like his idealism and that like the philosophies that he crafted, you know, in his youth, right, were like not foolproof, right? That he believed his own fairy tales and that like
his own myth.
Yeah, right. He believed in his own myth, and that the idea of like, yeah, like ideas are great in the classroom or in the court or in the you know, whatever, in the salon, I think is what they say. But when it comes to be applied to real people, like there are costs to your philosophy.
This will not be hard. Shangmire is now being forced to acknowledge that which always follows revolution. He too believed his own myths, and now all his philosophy is cracking under the weight of reality. Shangmire is not rebelling; he is mourning.
Yeah.
And I appreciated that because I think to the point that Sean made earlier, and it's a point that I think comes up often when people argue about politics, is it's really easy to be an armchair quarterback, you know, and say that it all comes down to, you know, quote unquote moral decisions, right? Because there's another line in that where it says that he preaches an unrealistic morality where the king, you know, is required to, like, you know, the inverse of that. I can't remember the exact line, but I think like that is kind of the main point of his arc, right? Is like, when does your philosophy, like, how does your philosophy stand up to practice? Like, what happens when people's lives are on the line?
And then also the sorts of people who can adopt your philosophy and the application of said philosophy can have hugely negative ripple effects. Tetu is actively using the philosophy of Changamire and applying it, but obviously he's doing so in a way that is not ultimately beneficial for the people, but they think it is.
Well, we see it all the time in history. Right. We see people take the Bible or the Quran and try to apply it in a way that is skewing the words. We see people take... We saw Stalin take Marx or Lenin's words and use it to slaughter 100 million people or whatever. This is the kind of shit that happens throughout history. You just skew the narrative to fit a despot.
Yep. You weaponize an ideology.
Absolutely. So then I think the only other sort of main character that we haven't yet spoken to is Shuri. And again, her sort of arc prior to this story is what informs so much of it, in that her death is what kicks all of this off, really, because she was the queen. And she brought a lot of stability to Wakanda that was lost when she died, alongside all the other terrible things that had occurred. But let's think about what she represented. She was a woman, right? She was a queen. She was a Black Panther. She was a woman. Those are all huge. The Dora Milaje really rallied around her. And you can see that when she comes back in the story and she confronts Ayo and Aneka, how impactful it is for them to see her again.
Those are the other two main characters that we didn't address, but I feel like they're encompassed here.
Oh, we talked about
them. Oh, my bad.
I'm sure there's more to say, but
yeah.
But they're so impacted by her return, right? And so if you just think about just those two having that reaction, what it would be like for the masses to see her again, that's who she was for this world. That's who she was for these people. And she died. And Black Panther had to take over in a situation where people wanted her and not him, most likely. And he had to repair the world. So that's a huge, huge burden. And then her journey to coming back to the world and how she does that and where she ends up, I thought was interesting. But I will admit, it was probably my least favorite part of the book. Just her actual sort of journey in the spirit world and coming back.
It felt very info dumpy. Like, it was always just like, and a lot of times it felt very like Matrix, you know, like, let's kind of like wax philosophic about nothing really.
It reminded me of the parts in the Immortal Iron Fist where they talk about the Iron Fists that have come before Danny, and they talk about the history of all the people they fought and all the cool things they've done. But in this, like, it felt more, for a lack of a better word, tribal, and it felt like it was just stories and myths more than actual, stuff that really felt relevant to what was going on.
Yeah, it felt kind of disconnected.
Yeah, it wasn't meaty. And so one of the things, though, that I don't know if you guys, I don't know how you read it, but in the back of each issue, in the physical version, there's the letters page. And frequently, people would write in talking about certain pieces of Shuri's journey and certain things that they saw that were related to something in literature or something historical that they found meaning in. But which made, I'm sure, enhanced their reading of those portions of the book. But the problem is that if you didn't grasp those things, then it just kind of falls flat. And then beyond that, since we're talking comics, I just don't think that was great comic material. In the sense that it wasn't super engaging, at least for me. Did anyone feel differently than that?
Yeah, I don't know. It was interesting for you guys to say that, because I felt that the stories of themselves, like the purpose of stories, is to sort of strike up an idea in conversation. Like that's why you have old wives' tales, like all this stuff. So I sort of saw it as a natural way to bring up an idea by alluding to like the boy and the jaguar, or the cheetah rather. Like it was a way to sort of ground mysticism and ground an idea that was reflected in the actual action parts of the story. I viewed it as like almost like a counterpoint to what was going on in the story, where they would talk about something, they'd bring up some kind of piece of Wakandan history that might affect something later on. Like there was a moment when they were in like these ruins, and I think a couple issues later, who was it? It was one of the Midnight Angels. They brought up something about a similar area. It was like the Biri people, but then like before that they were the Buri, who like had gotten taken over by something else. I don't know. To me, I felt that I had the opposite reaction, where to me it was meaty, but it was presented in a way that might not have been necessarily. It wasn't executed too well, but for me, I think it had its relevance and its strong impact.
What connection then, like specifically for like you gave the example of the boy and the jaguar. What did you see come out of that? Because I looked for that too, because I thought that message was something that I could grasp, but I didn't really see it very well in the story. Did you make a connection there that I would have missed, or?
For me, I made the connection like directly to T'Challa. Like he was having an internal conflict at that point, where he didn't necessarily believe in what he was doing. He was confused about what it is that he needed to do, and that's something that plays out throughout the book. He doesn't have that confidence, and he doesn't have that security in himself to be like, this is what needs to be done. And so it was reflective of T'Challa as the boy who himself didn't know it, that he could beat the cheetah, that he did have it in him to do what was necessary, and for T'Challa to save Wakanda. That's how I saw it.
Well, and to your point, that's absolutely reflected in certain conversations. So if you adopt your theory a little bit and just make it more to be that T'Challa doesn't believe that he is a good king, that he is an effective king, then he's definitely the boy, and the accepting himself as a king, as a good king, as a king who can act and who can lead his people, would be him beating the cheetah. And that's absolutely reflected in the dialogue between him and his mother, where she tells him, straight up, listen, you can do what you need to do. You're the king. You're still looking at being the king is this massive burden, and that's you're always going to feel this way if you keep viewing it that way.
Well, yeah, and she also says, like, you're looking at being a king as being like the other kings,
Right.
like you are a king or like whatever you do is king, like, because you're the fucking king.
Right.
So like decide what kind of king you want to be and go be that king. You know, don't try to chase legacy or bow to tradition.
Sure.
You know, like, if you want to change the rules, you're the only one stopping you from doing that. You're in charge.
That's right. So abolish the monarchy.
But so then Shuri does eventually come out of that. They Black Panther and Eden do rescue him. What did you guys think about where she was at when she came back? What did you think about her character now that she was an active participant in the story itself?
Oh no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like I said, her parts of the story didn't connect for me. They didn't feel meaty. They didn't feel necessarily necessary. So her journey through that and the way she comes out on the other side didn't completely make sense to me. Like, it didn't necessarily feel earned, I guess. I mean,
so
in terms of, like, I'm sure in terms of the story and in terms of, like, what she went through in were I looking at it as a citizen of Wakanda, it would have been fine, but in terms of the narrative, it didn't make sense to me,
Right.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. And it wasn't even that, like, I didn't understand her journey. It was more just, like, it didn't resonate with me.
Yeah.
Like, every other one of these characters, we talked about how they had a meaningful arc, and I think none of them are really painted in any kind of, like, good or bad way. Like, it's all kind of shades of gray, is that the worst of them have redeeming qualities and the best of them have sinister qualities. And I think she's the only character who feels like she exists kind of outside of that. Like, she spends her whole time, like, attaining enlightenment, and then she comes back just to be this, like, otherworldly, inhuman, like, wisdom machine, and it just, like, didn't resonate with me. Like, I understood what she meant to the people as a symbol, so, like, what she achieved for the plot worked for me in terms of, like the point you made, right, of, like, what it means to see her return, right? That she was this queen that was beloved and strong and was the last leader that they had during a time before all this bad. So, like, I got that, but as a character, her arc didn't really speak to me.
It felt Deus Ex Machina in a way. It simplified real-world problems.
Yeah.
In that there's a clear gender inequality problem in Wakanda at this time, and she comes back and wisdom onto the Midnight Angels, and all of a sudden this wave of rebellion is marginalized by it, and it undercut something that was really meaty about the first 7 issues of the book.
And I think especially when you then have the later context of when they're all meeting at oh my god, what is it? We literally said it like 30 times. Right? The philosopher, Changemeyer. Thank you. I kept wanting to say, like, Charlemagne, which is, like, so not the same thing.
Yeah.
And, when they're, like, at the meeting there, right, to, like, talk about the new government, and, like, the grandmother who, I don't even know if we ever got her name, but the grandmother who's, like, working with the 2 iron
sure,
yeah.
The Midnight
revolutionary
Angels,
women. Yeah. Thank you, the Angels, yeah. She's like, what were they supposed to do? Just, like, let them keep raping and killing us? And she's like, yes! Like, because we all swore a duty, and no one man, no one woman. And I'm just like, no, like, that's kind of bullshit. Like, she didn't do any, like, I'm sorry, like, that she broke the law, but, like, what she did was morally just, and arguing against that is, like, is really problematic in my mind. That they're gonna put this, like, I get it. Oh, you're supposed to represent the best of us, so we can't allow you to break the rules and change around what that means. And it's like, yeah, but what she was doing was literally stopping a rapist. Like, I have a really hard time swallowing that, like, greater good kind of philosophy when you're talking about what is not gray. Like, there are shades of gray in this whole story. This is not a gray area. This is a bad person doing bad things, and this person who can stop them, stopping them. Yes, outside of the law, but, like, come on.
It's not even that. It's a misnomer. It's not a greater good. The reality is that there is an extreme gender issue in Wakanda, and her being this figurehead of morality isn't preventing people from getting raped at that time.
But again, there is a gray area because of their position. They're not supposed to act unilaterally. That's the whole point. That's what makes the philosophy of Tetu and the Midnight Angels so murky and questionable just as much, and that's why it was so cool to see these two pillars of idea sort of presented against each other, because they're both not answering their own questions. If it's no one man, then how are you allowed to act unilaterally and just kill somebody because you disagree with what they do? That's a question that has to be answered. And the answer isn't as simple as, oh, well, it's a wrong behavior, so we can kill him for free. Because at some point you have to ask who determines what's a wrong behavior, and that's when you get back to no one man. And that's why the questions of the book are so meaty and so interesting.
That's a legitimate point. Yeah, like I can definitely see that line of thinking. I guess it's just like, maybe it's that line coming from that character, but like it just, that I remember really sat with me the wrong way.
Well, I mean, if you're not going to act unilaterally against someone who's acting unilaterally against you, like, what's the point? You know what I mean?
That's a big, heavy question. I feel like the book deals with that in a very, very interesting way, especially when you look at how it ends, where they sort of expand to have a parliament and have a group that's going to talk about these things and not just leave it up to the decision of Black Panther or Ramonda or Shuri. You know, that it's going to be more open. And I think that was such a great way to come to closure about these issues, to have a new way of dealing with things.
Yeah, we'll see. Just like Tsar Nicholas and his fucking Duma, it's going to be a toothless fucking organization. T'Challa still got this ability to raise the military. And his sister, Shuri, she's going to have tremendous sway over this parliament.
Kale, you were about to speak.
I don't know. It doesn't feel relevant anymore. I don't know how to answer this question or address even this statement. I didn't see a problem with what Shuri told Ao and Aneka and their grandmother. She says, yes, that's exactly what you were supposed to do. This was your position, and you broke it, so you have to be punished. Okay, your girlfriend broke it by breaking you out of jail. Well, now both of you have to be punished. Those are the rules.
Who gives a fuck about the rules?
And I'm not, and that's sort of what I'm saying. Like, I don't think they were wrong. Ao and Aneka, I don't think they were wrong. But I do think, given their position, if they're going to do something wrong...
Abolish the monarchy.
Well, I mean, that's not their job. That's T'Challa's job.
See, this is the problem of trying to talk with you about anything, Phil.
I'm not disagreeing. Like, your example of Nicholas the Tsar or whatever, and Black Panther still being able to amass the troops and Shuri still having sway over the Parliament. The Queen of England can still do that stuff.
Not really. She's largely a figurehead.
She can still do all that stuff. Like, she's largely a figurehead, yes, but she's still a queen. Like, if she wants that power, she can still swing in and take it.
I think again, like the problem, despite like, you know, aligning more with your sympathies on this one, Phil, I think the problem with where you're coming from at it though is that like you don't see the problem with the side that you agree with, you know, which is that like, and that's the thing that Shuri says to them and the grandmother says to them during their meeting too, of like, okay, great, like you're killing the bad people, but what else are you going to do?
Yeah.
Like, are you just destroyers? Because like, if all you're doing is playing judge, jury, and executioner, how long is it until you kill the wrong person?
Yeah, T'Challa.
You know, and
T'Challa even says, you know, if I pardon you, what else have I pardoned in a future unseen? If I let you go now, who knows what you're going to do next?
The problem with that mentality is this. That's like a very American, like, slippery slope fallacy. How far do we go till we go too far? Is that it halts any actual notion of progress. Why does it have to be a slippery slope? Why can't there be actual resolution that comes from revolution? That kind of thing has happened before. It's just this mentality of conservatism, of being like, whoa, let's pump the brakes, because otherwise what will happen? Well, what happens if you don't do anything? It's the same shit that's been happening.
But at the same time, when you're going down a slippery slope, you don't dive head first. You lean back and you take slow and careful steps.
But that's my entire point, is that who's saying this is a slippery slope? Who's saying that's the ground that is being stood upon?
The people who can see the slope.
The people who are threatened by quote-unquote slope.
Okay, but like, Phil, look at it through the lens of the work, right? Of this text.
Yeah, you're still armchair philosophizing, like.
Yeah, right, and like that's the whole point of like the narrative, is that like it's harder than that, because like it's easy to say that, but like in the context of the narrative, like they're on the verge at least of being willing to side with a warmonger for the quote-unquote greater good. So how are they any better than the people that they were revolutioning against?
Well, that's definitely what the book waxes poetically, and I think that's what makes it so interesting.
Right.
But that's what we're arguing with you about.
What?
So let me just ask you guys this question so that we can move on. Do you guys think that at least the book handles these sort of heavy political, social issues in a nuanced fashion that presents the sides equally and sort of justly?
Yeah, for the most part. I think we expressed how the quote-unquote true villains, I don't know if they come out as, equally represented, but, you gotta have a bad guy, right? So
I think it's more about their ideology. Like, if anything, from an ideological, philosophical perspective, Changamire would be the villain. He represents the direct counterpoint in terms of philosophy to the monarchy. And so, in that regard, what I'm asking you is, do you think that the perspectives of those two, so Changamire and the monarchy, do you think that those two perspectives are brought to fruition properly and given their proper time?
Yes and no. I think we've talked about it a lot here, and I think I've expressed my concerns with some of the positions that are taken by the narrative, because I think it asks these questions and then almost tries to answer them, and I think the answer is not super satisfying to me, because I don't necessarily agree with all of its conclusions. But that's a personal issue for me, right? Like, I think in terms of the overall narrative, I would say for the most part, yes. I think that the sides are painted pretty fairly, and that it is meant to show that, like, not any one side is totally right or wrong, and that, like, the realities of rule are a lot more complex than we armchair quarterbacks would like to think.
Yeah, and to what Pete said about it, like not, like it didn't necessarily jive with your personal opinions. I think that, like to me, certain things also didn't necessarily align with my sort of sensibilities and thinking, but I feel like in the setting that were presented, it makes sense that some things I wouldn't agree with necessarily. You know, there are compromises, there are things that make it into law that I won't agree with, but in general something else might be included there that I do, that someone else might not. I just feel like it was dealt with in a very realistic way that I appreciated, like the story itself. And I feel that for his first time to sort of tackle this kind of large idea and sort of present it the way he does and laid out, I think it was a really solid storyline for him for his first comic. Like this was executed very well.
Well,
in a couple years, I hope to see him tackle something like this or something similar to this, with just that much more refined finesse.
yeah, I hope he leads Wakanda. We can all agree, fuck Namor, though, right?
I mean,
Yeah, Namor's kind of an
that's
asshole.
that's general, life.
Yeah.
I love the
Go around
Namor
all day, fuck
character,
Namor.
but he is
Yeah, no, like
definitely-
Namor's a dope character, but it's
Yeah.
because he's such
Yeah.
a dick.
Yeah.
You love to hate him. Like me.
No, I don't love to hate you, and I don't
You
hate
just
you.
hate to hate me.
No, it's more than I hate that I love you.
I just hate you.
Jeez. Okay, so let's can we talk about the art here?
Oh, it's phenomenal. The inking is phenomenal.
Yeah, I think he's really solid.
My favorite touch of it was its use of silhouettes.
Mm-hmm.
Like I loved when they would have those moments of like certain characters kind of cast in the shadow, and you would only have like little tiny signifiers of like their overall look. I thought that was just a really, really cool like stylistic choice, and it kind of reminded me of of some like traditional African art that I've seen, and like that more like kind of like silhouette's not the right word for it, but you know what I mean. It's like that kind of like stripped down look at like presenting the human form, and like I really appreciated that because it's different for one thing, but also just because I think it spoke to one of the themes of the book, right, which is like the roots and the connection of like the people to the country, and like in a more naturalistic kind of sense. So I think like having something that was representative of like traditional African art like seemed really appropriate for the narrative, and any little touch like that is just like, it's a fun kind of like visual palette cleanser,
So real quick, I do want to shout out the inkers just because I didn't do it earlier. So Carl Story was an inker on this series, and then so was Joe Sinat. So both of those guys, they did a great job. And when you're talking about the art and you're talking about some of the African tribal influences in the art, you have to look to Brian Stelfreeze, because he did a ton of work in researching sort of African tribal costumes and different things like that to apply to this book, and it really, really resonates. And it's so cool to see the clothing style and the headdress and everything else in what is a at least in the Golden City, like a super modern, high-tech environment. It's really cool, very interesting dynamic, and I think that this book would have been underserved had they just been wearing suits and, regular dresses and everything else. Because, first of all, it wouldn't have fit, and then second of all, it's like, why do that when you could do something way cooler than that,
Well, it's also not realistic, right? Like, I like the idea that there's, like, a route to, like, the style and culture of, like, the real world Africa, but like in a way that's like futurist, like that's cool.
Well, there's something I want to mention. I won't dwell on it, but to what you're saying, Pete, there's a real undercurrent subtext of the story about Wakandan nationalism. Even Aurora Storm makes the point that Wakandans think they're better than other Africans, which is a really interesting subtext throughout the story. Which plays on like the ethno-nationalism. So.
Yep.
I think that is definitely an undercurrent throughout the whole series, and it really becomes apparent when the crew comes in and helps Black Panther deal with Zeke Stain and his little party. Just that, number one, Black Panther deliberately brought black heroes, because if he didn't, then they wouldn't have been necessarily accepted. And number two, that they should probably get out because they don't look like everybody else, even though they are black, and that they might not have been well received had they stayed too long.
I love that he was like there were like certain aesthetic concerns.
Yeah.
Like
they didn't even bring in Sam.
Right, because he was Captain America.
Captain
Exactly.
America, right.
Yeah.
That made sense. I was like, oh, yep, that makes sense, totally.
And then,
you wouldn't bring that anywhere else.
Jesus Christ. What was the name of the guy who was helping him out throughout the whole story?
Eden.
Who has like the warp powers?
Manifold.
Yeah, like I thought it was interesting that like it was okay that he's like, well, you've been here the whole time, you can stick around.
Is he Wakandan?
No,
or is he just
he's
African?
I think he's just African. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I feel like that, like, I remember he was like, all right, you're bad enough. Like, okay. anyone else is too much. Like,
but to take it back to the art, so one of the problems that I had with the series, despite how excellently I thought Brian Stelfreeze did with the first arc, he only really worked on those first 4 issues. He did consulting as far as like the look of the book thereafter and covers, but the rest of it was handled by Chris Sprouse, and then like you had some other artists who don't really get credited who helped with finishes. So in the last book, it really feels like sort of almost a hodgepodge, just because there's so many people who worked on it, and that definitely affected my reading of it, just because you could see from page to page when things were changing, and I hate that.
Yeah.
I think also just like the last 2 issues I thought were the weakest.
Yep. Visually
of
speaking,
the whole narrative. Yeah. Like not only just visually speaking, but I feel like in story as well. Like they're like that's where all the action starts, and like when a big part of the issues where the visuals get sloppy is like big fight scenes and stuff. It didn't work for me.
If you want to talk about the worst parts of the book, I actually thought the worst issue was the worst issue was the first issue. It felt like a new writer. Like the dialogue was stunted.
Writing wise.
Well, yeah, because he was talking about the narrative as well.
Sure.
Like that felt like a new writer writing a comic book, and I was like, oh boy, strap in. But it got much better.
Yeah, Sean, to what you were saying, it disrupted my reading of it, because there was a moment where I flipped, I just went to the next page, and then Changamire was like at a really awkward angle, and I was like, his beard looks different from like the page before, and I was like, it threw me out.
Yeah.
There were moments where it threw me out of the story. So that was a criticism I had.
While we're on the subject of nitpicking, was the thing that really bugged me, especially in the early issues, was how they were interchangeably referring to T'Challa by like 2 different like names that both meant king. Like they had the one that was like, oh, he's the orphan king, but then there was like the term that like the people who respected him were using that meant like, the Panther King or whatever, like the real name. And like I was just like, there were so many times where I kept flipping back to the first issue to be like, which one's which, and like who's saying what right now, because like it just got away from me, especially in a book where there were so many new characters. You know, where like I don't know 90% of the people in this book. Like T'Challa is the only person I really know,
and you're not calling him by his name.
And they're calling him by like 4 names. And it's like I can't. Like that was like that took some getting used to for sure.
I actually really appreciated that because it felt very
regal,
but also like
just fitting.
Yeah, like I believe that, especially coming from a Spanish household, but then also having exactly, Marco. Like that's pretty common.
I was literally gonna respond by going, white people.
Well, I mean, that's not fair. I call my parents, mom, and then, shitty mom, and then dad, and then best dad, shitty dad. I mean, it's orphan dad.
But I also thought that them calling him, I believe it was Harum Ofal, was super appropriate because that and the Orphan King, that moniker, that really nasty, in their world, a nasty term, ended up sort of really playing into the last couple of issues when they break down how that applies to Wakanda. I thought that was brilliant. That was amazing.
Yeah, I'm not criticizing the usage of it in the script. Just that was definitely a pain point for me as a reader. I think like the fact that I read it all in one sitting and I felt that way, I can only imagine how I would have felt if I was reading it month to month, and I'm just like, who are they talking about?
So any other comments on the art?
I thought the way they did Panther's mask was really cool. I've always really thought that, man, it's so cool.
Yeah, they're like kind of like
digital looking,
transitory, like
the weirdly Kirby shapes around his head, and and the way the lenses fold over too is probably my favorite part. I think that's just
that was super cool.
I
liked how in the fights, whenever you would get hit, you would see it like kind of splinter and everything. I was like, that was really neat.
The only other criticisms that I had regarding the art were 2. One was that I didn't love the way that the scenes with Shuri looked when she was still in that sort of spirit world. Though for whatever reason, that just kind of like, I don't know, threw me off a little bit. There was a lot of like color going on and different things. I don't know. That just threw me off. And then towards the end of the book,
thematically,
not thematically, just visually, just in the sense that it just was a lot.
The one thing I liked a lot at those parts where I thought the lettering was really cool. Like I liked that the what was her name?
The spirit. Like it wasn't her
the
mother,
Goit or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the visage of her mother, but like this wisdom keeper. I liked that the color of her text was the same as that aura that she had, and that it kind of had it had like a neon like glow to it almost. Like there's something about it that I was like, this is a cool like cohesion. I thought that was a cool choice.
Right, and that had the exact opposite effect on me.
Okay.
But that's fine. But the only other thing, this one really stuck out to me as a problem. And this is probably also a writing criticism, but definitely artistically. I thought that the final sort of battle when the people were breaking into the Golden City was laid out really bad.
Oh my god!
Yeah.
You can't tell me that was a nationwide war. There were like they showed like four
7 people.
Yeah, like
Max.
7 people, and that really was weird to me.
Yeah, like they're like the city fell, and I'm like, it looks like they took over like a block.
Yeah, what happened? Like nothing visually happened. And then I thought
this looks like the Eagles got into the Super Bowl.
Worse than that, man. Those streets were packed in Philly when like it looked like a group of friends just kind of hanging out. Like nothing was represented well visually at that point, and that really took me out of the story because I was looking forward to an epic battle, and we did not get that at all.
Not at all.
So again, any other comments on the art before we? Okay, so I want to end just by talking about Coates as a writer. So like more focusing on the dialogue than the story because I think feel like we already kind of robustly covered the story. Did you guys think that in terms of his writing, dialogue, and stuff like that, that he did well for his first outing?
I think in terms of
mixed
dialogue, I think it and dialogue and theme, I kind of feel like this would have come across better in like an actual like novel, or like if they'd taken this story and made it like a novelization, I think it would have come across a little better. Just because, especially in the first couple issues, you can really tell that he's trying to get his feet. And it sort of felt to me like his themes were a little bit bigger than what he was able to convey in a comic script. Not that he did it bad necessarily, but like he didn't quite know how to put down what he wanted to do. Does that make sense?
I mean, it makes sense. I just don't know that I agree. I feel like the themes were very well fleshed out, and sort of brought to light. I agree with you on a dialogue front, though, 100%. Because there were times when, I mean, look, we both right? So, like, the rules of writing dialogue, and there were pages that were just like filled with big blocks of text.
Yeah, no, I was reading.
Fucking bubbles.
So one little tidbit that I've picked up is that a speech bubble should only have generally 14 or 15 words. One of his bubbles had like 23 and then 25, and I sat there and I counted them. And I looked at Jess and I went, "What is he doing?"
Yeah.
Well, and it's like many of them were like that too. It's not like a sometimes. Yeah, no, like that's something I noticed too. Like, as like someone who started lettering like last year, like there was many times where I was just like keenly aware of like how much text was on the page, how many huge bubbles were like covering an entire panel, or like how close the margins were on some of these bubbles. Like, it was a lot of text. And I think the bigger issue for me, like, I agree with Sean. I don't think it was an issue of theme. I think the themes in the book come across well. I think it was just the dialogue. It was that a lot of the dialogue just didn't sound the way that people talk. Like there were times where they sounded like characters who were like delivering soliloquies at each other, not people having a conversation.
Yeah, I agree with that. I thought for me, the highlight point of when it got good, for me anyway, was actually when they introduced the crew and they were battling with Zeke and his people. The reason why I feel that way is because the dialogue got a lot looser. Misty Knight had some really great quips and lines, and Storm and Luke and Zeke got his stuff into that I thought was really fun. And that's where it seemed like Coates sort of let go of feeling like he needed every line to be this epic thing and just was shooting. And that's what you want to see from a writer, is when you can get those dialogue bubbles that have, like less than 10 words or whatever, but they really hit and they have bite. And that's where I felt like that. And then for most of the rest of the book, I didn't feel like that. Not that the dialogue was always bad or that it was even bad at all, but it was a lot.
I actually thought that's where it rallied. I really didn't like when the crew showed up. I thought it was gimmicky. I thought it clashed with everything else. Like there was a decent enough tie-in to explain why these characters are here, but like I liked it being just a inclusive situation, and I felt like that was all kind of just a distraction. It felt comic booky in a bad way. As for the dialogue itself, I actually don't really have much of a problem with it. I think it tries to approach heady geopolitical situations that are really real, and he comes from it from a real writer's perspective, and a lot of new comic book writers have this problem of blocking text. Scott Snyder had that problem. Kevin Smith, your mileage obviously can vary with him as a writer, but he had that problem. A lot of writers who don't break into the comic book industry as comic book writers have this problem. And I think it got better as it went on.
Bendis made it his brand, so I don't.
I agree. I think almost with everything Phil said in that, which is kind of scary. But yeah, I also thought that was sort of where when the crew came in, it kind of like took a dip for me. I think that the dialogue wasn't an issue. To your point, Phil, he is trying to explain a lot of meaty stuff, and I think he did it well with the text that he was given. And I just feel like as a new writer, there were maybe some executional things that, you know, with time you get better at.
Yeah.
Specifically, like providing maybe even some more artistic direction, like making that cohesion a little bit just stronger. Trying to capture all the different themes. I think he did. I said it before. Like he did a good job at it, but I feel like there was still something that in the execution, when he does something like this next, will be that much more just natural.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think especially seeing the way that the dialogue evolves over the series, it leads me to believe that he figured it out. So I almost agree with you, Sean. I think it was the dialogue immediately following the issue where the crew shows up where I think it really picked up. There's that issue that opens with them like leaving. I felt like after that interaction was kind of done, I think that was where I really felt like the dialogue got cleaner. So around the same time in the narrative, for sure.
Yeah, I also want to be clear. I wasn't actually saying that like I thought that the crew coming in was like a good thing. I'm simply saying that I like the dialogue from that part. It got a lot punchier, got a lot more engaging. There were jokes finally. So you know
that one bit where Misty's like, I take reservation with the term hood, and like Luke's that's because you're hood.
That was
like,
perfect. That was amazing.
That was a good exchange.
Yeah.
That got a laugh out of me.
I was laughing throughout that whole time, and so that's why it really sticks out to me. But any closing thoughts before we cap out this episode of the book club?
Black Panther turned out to be a villain. Who would have thought?
Unlike Phil, this was not predictable.
Oh.
I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good read. I'd definitely be interested to see what else Coates can do in this space if he so chooses. I think his next comic will be a lot better than this one, even though I thought this was a really, really good first effort. And I enjoyed it a lot more than I expected to. Not that I thought I wouldn't like it, but it got its hooks in me. You know, like the first night I picked it up, I planned on reading the first volume and going to bed, and I stayed up until 3 a.m. getting through the next one. You know, so yeah, definitely worth it.
Did you like it more than Black Panther and the Crew?
Did you?
You know, I don't know, man. That's the comic of our time. So.
Did I get the title wrong?
No, I was just gonna say, did he read Black Panther and the Crew?
No, I didn't read Black Panther and the Crew.
Oh, you always criticize it. I thought you read it. That turned out to be a better dig than I thought.
I want to point out, by the way, that this series is not over. So
right.
There's a lot more that does come, and this was in 2015. He considers this to be season 1 of the story. Season 2 has already taken place, and it's still rolling. So if you guys are interested in seeing how that has turned out, you can keep reading.
Or if you want us to keep reading, let us know.
Sure, absolutely. Kale, Marco?
I've never been a huge fan of the Black Panther. So like going into this wasn't, not that I didn't want to do it or anything, but it wasn't any revelatory experience. The story was good. I enjoyed it for the most part, but it wasn't enough that I would keep going. I definitely appreciate Coates' writing and his talent, and I can definitely see, you could definitely see his improvement, but I think I would rather see him a little bit later on something different that I would be interested in.
Huh. Okay, Marco.
Yeah, I mean, I have no connection to the Black Panther, so for me to come in to this book, I thought it was a really nice introduction, and I hope that other books are like this, like other Black Panther books. So if I do want to explore, I hope they are somewhat grounded in like a similar world. I mean, I don't know necessarily, but I hope it in the future, because I probably will maybe pick up the next book, because it did interest me enough for that. I hope that it sort of stays in the kind of realm that it was, and I feel like this is where Ta-Nehisi Coates is comfortable in, and I don't want him to be a superhero. I want him to be a king.
Marco.
Yeah, but if it goes down that route, count me out.
Would you like him to be a mighty king?
The Mighty Morphin King.
Maybe like no king was before.
Yes.
Maybe looking up, maybe looking down, maybe even working on his roar.
What are we even doing?
Yeah.
I don't know.
For me, I had read half of this prior to us agreeing to do this book club. So revisiting those issues with my eyes now, I enjoyed it probably more than I did the first time around. Even though I was further removed from the relevant context. And I enjoyed the first half maybe more than the second. But I still think it was really strong, and I'm really glad that we did this one. I really I love it when comic books get away from the sort of basic like superhero stories and are ready to deal with big meaty subjects like this, and you really can only do this kind of story with a few characters, and Black Panther is one of them. And I thought that he nailed it. It wasn't perfect by any means, but I really like what he did with it, and I appreciate him having the chutzpah to tell this story and to stick to themes that a lot of readers might not be interested in or familiar with, like African nationalism and very deeply ingrained African themes. The Ayo and Aneka were in a lesbian relationship, and sort of some of those themes, which actually a reader criticized the team for in the letters page, which I thought was really interesting that they even published it. But I just thought that there was a lot here, and I really enjoyed it. And I can't wait to see how much of this makes it into the film. So, I'm really excited for that. Phil, go ahead. Looks like you want to say something.
Next time we do the Black Panther podcast, we'll talk about Fred Hampton and Bobby Seale and Bobby Rush.
So, if you guys...
It's a wrestling joke. If you don't get it and Sean's laughing, it's a
you
wrestling
guys are fucking insane.
Wow, that is not a wrestling joke.
Oh, no, wait, it was a history joke. It was a
It's a
history
fucking
joke.
Black Panther reference.
Black Panthers.
Yeah,
Like
okay, sorry.
like
I
the
assumed
comic.
it was
I
wrestling.
don't read.
God.
The fucking Black Panther Party.
Black Panthers.
American history, Kel. The country that used.
Oh, I forgot all that. I don't live there anymore.
You fucking Kiwi.
Anyway, definitely let us know what you thought about this series if you had the opportunity to read it. And if you didn't, let us know what you thought about our dialogue regarding the series. How
did you enjoy having it spoiled for you?
Yeah. And then also, what would you like to see us read next? What books would you like to see us tackle? We're very open to suggestions as far as that goes. We're looking to do this on a much more regular basis, and we'll have more to say about that in the future. So stay tuned to our regular show, the Comics Pals, where we'll update you on what we'll be reading next and what you need to get if you would like to follow along. Of course, you can get us on iTunes and all other podcast hosting services. We are a 5-star rated podcast on iTunes, which I guess has a new name now. What's the new name?
Apple Podcasts.
Apple
Yeah.
Podcasts.
Shitty
Really
fucking podcasts.
rolls off the tongue.
Got a great ring to it.
Yeah. So then, of course, you can also write to us at thecomicspals@gmail.com. You can let us know what books you'd like us to read. Let us know your thoughts on this, of course. And then, last but not least, if you're on YouTube, hit that like button before you jump. Hit the share button to share it with your friends. And subscribe, because we're going to be doing a lot more stuff like this and other really cool stuff coming real soon. So stay tuned to us. And with that, we're the Comics Pals signing off. Take care, guys.
All
See you next
all
month.
power to the people.